Good afternoon, everyone, or whatever time you're watching this. I am Stephen J.B. Davis, your land specialist and residential realtor in the Bluegrass region of Kentucky, and you are watching Realtor on the Roof. Normally, this is a show where we get to know home professionals as pros and as people, but due to COVID, as so many sentences start off lately, we are not going to get to know any other professionals, but rather get more acquainted with a process that a lot of people have asked me about, a process that I've gotten some clients through in the recent past, and that process is home building. A lot of people are more and more curious about that. I think maybe the claustrophobia that this virus has sort of induced for a lot of us, and just thinking about other things that we can do. I know a lot of people have put in pools and done a lot of home improvement, and some other people have decided that maybe they want to get started on that dream of building a house on their own and living out that dream the way that they always wanted. So that's what this particular episode is about. We're going to outline the basic steps of that process, as well as some of the expenses that you might expect to encounter when you're going to build your own home on land. So the steps. They are quite simply to address finances, to assemble a team, to search and tour properties, to then offer and go through your inspection period, and then to close. So 5 steps. And of course, we're going to start in that order. Finances. The basics here are to figure out how much you can afford. It's just like buying a pre existing home. Figure out how much you can afford with your chosen lender, and also expect that you're going to have a pretty big down payment. Land is a risky thing for a lot of lenders, and actually pretty much for all of them. So you can expect 30 to 40% of a down payment of whatever your total cost for the land and building that home is. The next thing is to assemble your team. Get your who together. Who's designing your home? And if no one's designing it, then where are your home plans? And then the other piece of that design is who's going to build it. You need to have these people hired, like not just talking about it, not just I sent some emails. You've got to really be concerted about who is going to be involved in this process, because also your lender, who you've addressed in the previous step, is going to want to know this too. They're going to want to know that your builder is insured. They're going to want to explain how they disperse funds to the builder, because they're not going to give you funds as the buyer. They're going to give your builder funds as the home progresses in the construction process. So get those people together. It is integral that you do that from the start before you ever see anything. Then you need to answer the questions of, what does your home look like? What does the land look like is actually what I meant. What does the land look like, and what do you want to do on that land? So we're talking acreage. Is it wooded? Are there ponds? Are there um, uh, streams even? And then what kind of activities do you want to be able to do? Quickly, my buyers that I'm working with most recently, who are building their own home, shooting was a really big deal breaker for one half of the couple, and he was very adamant about that. So finding a property that shooting was allowed, because depending on which county you're in, and if you're in city limits versus a rural service boundary, or if your jurisdiction is the county versus the city, even though you may have a city address, like all of these zoning things come into play. And so whether your sticking point is livestock or chickens, or maybe even building a separate home down the line for one of your parents or older relatives, or Airbnb, addressing those questions of zoning for any future plans that you may have for that property is really important to do from the beginning, because you don't want to have bought a property and then not be able to use it the way that you want. So then there's seeing the places. You've defined, what you want in a property, who's going to build it, and all the way back to the beginning, what your budget is looking like. Now you get to see places. And because you kind of know what your house looks like, it's a lot easier to see a place and then, imagine a property there, or sorry, a home or a structure there, versus just being like, we're sitting here, we see the place, maybe the home looks like this or it looks like that. Instead of it being abstract, now it's sort of more cemented in your mind more or less what your home looks like, which makes seeing the property just a little bit easier, to either say this is not it, or wow, this is a really great contender, or this is perfect. So then there's the offer. Your offer needs to be written in such a way that it takes your needs into account. It needs to be contingent upon the things that you plan to do. Now, if you've got a great land agent like myself, you've done the homework and seen the documents to make sure that it's zoned properly for, A, B, and C uses, but there may still be outstanding items that you really need to have present in order for you to be able to build that home. For one, it needs to be big enough, right? So maybe you need a survey. Maybe you want to grow your own food. And so the way that the soil tests is a very big factor for you being able to buy that property or not. And then if you do get accepted, you get into the inspection period, which, depending on your agreement with the builders that you've hired, they may help you through that by connecting you with all the people that come through to evaluate the different parts of the land that your offer is contingent on. And if they don't provide that service as a part of your contractual agreement with them, then it's your agent's job to connect you with those resources. And you have your offer accepted, you will send it to your lender, or your agent will, and they're going to appraise the property. They're also going to appraise those home plans. So now you can see why those home plans are so important, because they're not just going to look at the land and say, yeah, this is great. They're going to combine the value of that property that their appraiser determines with the value of your home on paper. They're going to say it has these building materials, it's this big, it's got all of these features, and that spec appraisal, which is what a lot of people call it, takes a few weeks. So having those plans ready is super super important, and ultimately what's going to be like the last bureaucratic sort of line between you and getting the A-OK for, getting started on your dream. As for you, you're pretty much going to pay interest only on your borrowed amount for a certain period of time. That's all going to depend on the terms of your loan, of course. But in general, you're not paying principal and interest. You're just paying interest for the construction period for most loans. Expenses, right? Everything costs money, and that's probably one of the biggest surprises when I'm talking to people about this process and educating them about it. Because, you know, if you're buying a piece of raw land and you plan to put a house on it, if it's truly raw and it's truly undeveloped, you've got to be able to flush a toilet. You've got to be able to turn lights on and cook. And certainly, if you're just going to build your own house with your own hands, you may be able to get away with not having some of that. But most municipalities, and certainly all lenders, are going to require that a home be livable by 21st century standards. So that's probably the most expensive part of the process, is connecting utilities and developing infrastructure for that home to exist. Your electricity, your gas, your water, your sewage, connecting all those things and making them work are things that you have to figure into your loan. Because if you're not coming out of your pocket, then that means you're borrowing more money from your lender, which a lot of lenders will do. They will allow you to borrow money for those infrastructural costs, but you've still got, a glass to fill. Once you get to the top of that glass, whatever that glass is, maybe it's a $500,000 for you that you can borrow. Maybe it's $300,000 that you can borrow. Whatever the amount in that glass is, you've got to figure in those infrastructure costs as a part of filling up that glass. That's not a separate thing from your borrowing situation. Electricity is easily the most expensive part of developing a piece of property, but you've got to consider things like your water, things like your sewage. A lot of that stuff you're going to pay for the labor independently, and if city or county water and sewage is available, they will have their government people come out to install that stuff, but you're still going to have to do a lot of that groundwork by hiring a third party to dig the trenches and to to do like duct work for installing in-ground electricity. A lot of electricity companies will require that you do that separately, and then they'll charge you for their workers actually coming in and laying the lines and all that kind of stuff. So that's going to vary by company. It's going to vary by county. It's going to vary by distance. If you get lucky and there's electricity super close by, it can be a less expensive thing. But we're talking tens of thousands of dollars in order to just do that one piece, and then several thousand dollars into the tens of thousands when you combine all of the other utilities such as the gas and the water and the sewage. When you combine those things, you can definitely spend tens of thousands in order to make that happen. So keep those things in mind. If you are ever more curious and want a lot more detail about this process, I'd be happy to talk to you about it. You can find my information at the end of this video. Thanks for tuning in. Hopefully the next time I get a video out, I will be with someone, perhaps outside, but hopefully with someone so you can learn more about the people that make our houses into homes and our properties into fantastic places to live. But for now, thank you for tuning in to Realtor on the Roof. I am Stephen J.B. Davis, your land specialist and residential realtor here in the Bluegrass area, and I hope you join me again soon. Take care.